So recently, Overkills The Walking Dead was cancelled for pre-order on consoles and removed from being purchased on the Steam store. And well, it was kind of expected. It wasn't the worst game ever, I think Survival Instinct still takes that trophy, but the idea that the game was going to last was obviously never going to become a reality, and there's a lot of stuff pointing towards the direction of this. But something I've immediately noticed is that everyone is just immediately pointing fingers at the developers, stating for 5 years worth of work the final product is shit. Sure, that's fine, if you don't like it that's fair enough, but that information is not entirely true, and I think the blame lays elsewhere. And that's what I'm going to be talking about today. I think it's time we look into the story of Overkills The Walking Dead, more specifically the key points of its life and its abrupt death. So at first we need to rewind the story a little bit, 5 years to be exact. Things for the game known as Payday 2 were going really well. Overkill had just released the Big Bank DLC and things were going great. But then on July 10th, Overkill released an announcement simply named, "What's Next?" This announcement linked followers of Payday to a certain website, a website that's still up to this day funnily enough. Originally it showed a timer just counting down the next 34 days, and what's interesting about this? Well, in 34 days it would be August the 13th, my birthday. But more importantly, it would be the 1 year anniversary for Payday 2 being released. But what did this all mean? What was the website for exactly? Well, every day a new piece of audio would play on the website giving a hint at what might be coming.
Police have finally apprehended the young man who had been threatening to detonate a bomb at the ADC. The man wrote in an online chat room for members of the university that he was, quote, tired of no one paying attention to what's really going on between politicians and big corporations. The man was tracked down by the FBI with the help of his internet connection. The arrest itself was undramatic, but the atmosphere...
At first, these clips seemed very standard and they felt like they fit into the Payday universe, but after a while things got a little bit weird.
An American tourist bus was attacked on its way to the city of Durango, Mexico earlier today. Just south of the US border, the bus reportedly hit someone crossing the road and stopped. While the bus side of the road, it was attacked by an... Several eyewitness reports describe the incident as a massacre. Let's take some calls. We have our celebrity impersonation competition. Looks like we have Peter on the line. Peter, so how's your...
Anyone who's fled from their home or a group of people holed up in Queens Mountain Park. We have plenty of rations and warm clothes. We can survive it for a few days.
Help will remain on duty under all circumstances. Vital infrastructure will be kept operational, and the US dollar remains a viable currency. Keep calm, help is on the way.
These audio clips were all we had at first, so as you'd expect, people flew to the Steam forums trying to figure out what was coming. A lot of us, including myself, were expecting this to be related to the Hoxton's Breakout heist that was confirmed during the Dentist trailer, and a few of us thought it could be something Halloween related as well. But on August 13th we finally had an answer, and it wasn't something anyone was expecting. Skybound and Overkill had teamed up to make a game known simply as Overkills The Walking Dead. And what did everybody get for waiting each day? A melee weapon for Payday 2, with the initial release date of 2016. Now you can imagine a few people weren't entirely happy about this. Imagine waiting and theorising for over a month about a special announcement just for them to go, hey, we're making a game, and have a melee weapon you won't use anymore. Personally for me, I didn't really care all that much. We were getting a new game, more importantly, a zombie game, and best of all it was set in the Walking Dead universe. Now at the time my friend from uni had just forced me to sit down and start watching The Walking Dead, and from the get-go I was immediately hooked. I'm not a big fan of the show these days, but regardless of that, a new zombie game from the developers of Payday 2 was enough to get me excited. So from here the wait was on, but from within Overkill, things started to get a little bit messy. Now the development history is a bit messy in what did and didn't happen, but recently we did get more insight into what actually happened over the span of the last 5 years. So from the information I could gather, the first year wasn't a development year, instead it was in the more design stages of things, so concept arts, rough ideas, and most likely piecing the story together. So for the sake of information I had, let's just say the actual game development started in 2015. Ideas were set in stone and the development on the game had finally started. But there was a massive problem. The engine they were forced to use wasn't finished. Let me explain. Back in 2015, Starbreeze came up with the announcement that they've recently bought an engine called Valhalla for roughly 73 million Swedish krona, or for currency's sake, roughly £6 million in the UK. Now that's quite a big amount for game engines, especially when there's engines like the Unreal Engine or Unity out there for developers to use and pay for a license. But the real question here is, what the hell is Valhalla? Well, from researching the engine exactly, I found nothing. Well, nothing concrete. The best I could find was an article from Starbreeze on their own website when they purchased the engine, and even then that's not a lot to go by.
Valhalla represents the next generation with a true browser-based AAA game engine. Valhalla's graphic cloud engine will revolutionize the art pipeline by providing an integrated development environment for rapid and creative game development across multiple studios and teams. Valhalla supports not only 3D, but is fully virtual reality ready, and proofed on several headsets currently on the market.
So what does that mean exactly? Well, from what I interpreted it as, Valhalla is a more graphically focused engine over anything else, but then again the statement says it's a AAA browser-based game engine, which could mean pretty much anything from where I'm sitting. It sounds more like you can run a game through something like Internet Explorer, but after a massive post where some of the game developers spoke out about the development of this game, it appears Valhalla wasn't anywhere near what we expected, as the engine wasn't even ready when they were given it to use.
There wasn't even a file open button when we got it. One person said it was impossible to use, and this is when it all started to get a bit fucked up.
As one person tasked with building it said bluntly, Valhalla was a piece of shit. It was unworkable, said another. In most cases, it was like the engine was fighting against you.
So from the mouths of the developers, Overkill's The Walking Dead has started development on an engine that wasn't even close to being finished, and to this day it's unclear what the state of this engine even is. But a couple of years later this all ended up being a massive waste of time, as on August 25th of 2017 an article was published that Starbreeze had switched from Valhalla to the Unreal Engine. But that wasn't the end for Valhalla. In the article it states that Starbreeze had been working in negotiations with Epic, the creators of the Unreal Engine, to add Valhalla into the Unreal Engine as a sort of plugin, as it was required to achieve the vision Overkill had to make the Walking Dead game. As for what that plugin even does, to this day it's never been explained, but from playing a lot of the Walking Dead game and reading this article I do have a theory. Again, from the same article, it states that Valhalla includes the technology for randomization of worlds and dynamically generated gameplay, but going from what the developer stated, Valhalla was more of a basic render engine. So from the information we've got, if you add them together, the most plausible outcome, Valhalla is just an RNG based engine for certain graphics. And the only thing that springs to mind that is random in the game is the design of the walkers. I only think this due to some patch notes from a previous update in the game, where it states that they added more walker bodies and faces to the pool of walkers so there's more variety. Meaning that all the Valhalla engine could possibly do is constantly choose in game which head and body to mix up with the walker spawn on the map. So if that's the case, bearing in mind this is pure speculation, the last 2 years of development have been absolutely pointless, meaning Overkill's The Walking Dead was made in just over a year.
Management announced Overkill's The Walking Dead was moving over from Valhalla to Unreal. 2 years of work was chucked in the bin. The developers were stunned. People had been warning them for years, saying, "You need to use Unreal now, otherwise all the assets everyone has been working on will be completely useless."
"We oversold Unreal," one person who worked on the game told Eurogamer. "It was as if switching to Unreal was going to solve everything. In their minds it was magical, but we had other problems that couldn't be fixed by just changing the engine."
So as it sounds, the devs weren't entirely pleased that management decided to change the engine so far into the development of the game. Now you'd be thinking that's not too bad, they could just import things and continue with their work on an easier engine. Well, sadly things didn't really go according to plan.
If you go to any studio now, there's always a good hope at least 50% of the people know the engine they're working on, so they can coach the rest, said one person who was at the coalface. But in this case, it felt like just 10% of the people understood the engine. 90% of the people were just relying on that 10% or checking online. So we were using tutorials to try and make a game. That was bad.
So while it appears that the devs from Overkill kept requesting that they change from Valhalla to the Unreal Engine, and they did get their wish, it obviously wasn't enough as most developers on Overkill weren't experienced with this engine. So within a year, Overkill had to make an entirely new game from scratch, with very little experience on the table for the Unreal Engine. And with E3 on the horizon for next year, the question remains, if they'd actually have anything in time for the consumers to see. June 2018. More importantly, E3 was upon us. Everyone was excited for the new upcoming games, and we were told that finally during the PC Gamer E3 show that we'd finally see some gameplay alongside a release date for Overkill's The Walking Dead. At this point, it's worth noting that I'd actually lost faith in the developer over the direction they had taken with Payday 2, and at this point, while I was definitely interested to see what the game might end up being, I wasn't excited for it anymore, but I know a few people still were. So people stayed up watching through the fairly cringy event to where they would finally see a gameplay trailer for Overkill's The Walking Dead. But something about this trailer seemed off. After watching the trailer they had shown during the event, there wasn't much gameplay towards the trailer itself. Now a few people picked up on this, but thankfully during the event we'd actually see some gameplay of the first main mission, Hell or High Water. But what followed didn't really end well. Gameplay was shown of the game, and while I wasn't entirely put off by it, a majority of people were. Complaints were thrown around left, right and centre, the graphics didn't look that great, the gameplay looked clunky and it wasn't what they expected, and a bunch of people mocked at the idea of this being sold as a AAA title. And in that sense they have every right to. Overkill is nowhere near a AAA development team, they had one successful game and that's it. Overkill games were never polished, but there was some charm behind them that made them look appealing and addictive. Overkill's The Walking Dead, however, looked like a joke to most people, with some even comparing it to Survival Instinct, which, let me just say, this game is nowhere near that bad. But that was it. A lot of people were put off and pre-orders were fairly low. They teased the idea of an upcoming beta if you pre-ordered, so a few people were convinced by that to try out the game first. As for the rest of us, we'd have to wait and see. But then they go to Gamescom, another gaming convention, but this time they actually set up a booth there for people to play a newer build of Overkill's The Walking Dead. And from the wrap-up video they posted, it all seemed positive. People seemed to really enjoy the game. Now, I wouldn't bring this up normally, but I feel that this is important because after reading something from a massive article, it doesn't appear to seem that way.
One person said, "When we showed the game at E3 last year, we came back and said that everyone loved the game. Everybody was waiting hours to play the game and they loved it. And then of course we saw the press and we saw people were saying, at best, it was average. Not a bad game, but not a good game all the time. So the team were watching and reading this and they didn't understand. They said, how is this possible? We said, don't worry about the negative people. It was not like this. We can assure you on the booth, people loved the game. But we had guys on our team who were there who said, no, that's not true. We had to cancel one demo because people didn't want to play that level because that level was not good or fun. But they never said that to us. You can't solve an issue if you don't admit you have one."
So basically they lied. I can't say for sure, but regardless, they tried lying to their team. From speculation, I'm guessing they decided to give the development team some sort of hope to boost their morale. But I don't think they expected the devs to look up the thoughts from people who tend to make videos and this kind of stuff for a living. It's rather sad really, as I can imagine this really upsetting some members of staff. But regardless of what they thought, they had to continue working, especially since the beta was just around the corner. On the first day of the beta, the game actually got delayed due to a mistake made by either Valve or Overkill, causing the beta branch not to launch for a few hours. But eventually it was released. And it went as bad as you'd expect. The beta was unstable, poorly optimised and riddled with issues. AI never worked as intended, you couldn't rebind keys and various other problems, and players weren't impressed. Some went to the forum to provide feedback and saying this game needs to be delayed, while YouTubers uploaded content with a more mixed reception.
It just really doesn't look it. And also that I can't turn the sensitivity down. There's no sensitivity slider. I can't change the fucking... Oh god! What are you talking about? I can't change the sensitivity.
My legs!
I'll dig you
got
out!
my legs,
I'm
Captain!
gonna dig you out! Don't worry. We'll have you out in a jiffy.
Dig out my legs! Tell my family they're alright.
So picking at it.
Go, cut it out. Get out from there. Oh, never mind. You are stuck.
I'm jumping, sir. It's not enough.
Now, I've already made 2 videos during the beta and I'll leave a card to the first one above. But while I wasn't very optimistic myself, I did explain that there's 2 more phases to this beta and I would have rounded them up on the final beta as well. The second beta didn't really add anything new to the game, but the final part added some other parts to the core of the main game. It wasn't awful, but it did show the problems this game was going to face at launch. Boring levels with minimal variety alongside various other bugs. But were the higher-ups of Starbreeze and Skybound listening to all the feedback from various players, calling out the poor product and begging them to delay the game to give them more of a chance to recover? Of course not. The 6th of November, the release date of Overkill's The Walking Dead. The reviews had come in and it was average at best. Scoring mostly 5s and 6s across the board, the biggest complaints came towards the overall performance and the network problems towards the game. An issue that sadly hasn't been fixed to this day. After all the reviews had come out and a bunch of people refunded their copies of the game, Starbreeze and Overkill didn't get a break as things started to crumble even more. On December 3rd of 2018, Starbreeze released 2 statements. Firstly, that they have filed for a reconstruction, and secondly, Bo Anderson, the CEO of Starbreeze, has stepped down and left the company. To leave this segment short, Bo Anderson is a horrible human being. I hate this man for various reasons, but there's another video by the YouTuber AceBats that goes into better detail, and if you're curious, I'll leave a link to the video down in the description. To sum him up though, the best I could say is he was a visionary and aimed big, which is a good thing when it comes to being CEO, but he wasn't a good person. He was egotistical and rude, not only to his employees, but also his family as well. Throughout the years of managing Starbreeze, it seems that there was a trail of bad choices that followed him every step he takes. He invested a ton of shares into an engine that didn't work, threw a ton of money into the VR industry and ended up with a product that still hasn't been released and is now paused due to financial troubles. One of the 2 games Starbreeze were planning on publishing has now been sold back to the developer to make some money after investing roughly $8 million into a game called Raid World War II. They sold the license to the only other successful game alongside Payday 2 back to Behavior, and to top it all off, his farewell email was quite sarcastic.
Dear hardworking Starbreeze crew, begins the company-wide email obtained by Eurogamer that Bo Anderson sent to the staff the day after he was fired. Goodbyes are hard, game overs, however, mean try again. My goodbye, I'm sure, is nothing special. Yesterday I was fired by the board as your CEO. Personally, though, I lost all my money, my family in divorce, and my kids' custody through the toil over the last 2 to 3 years working 100-hour weeks for Starbreeze and keeping you devs paid and in the game. With less and less developers willing to put in extra care in a product, it clearly limits the possible result of enough quality in time. This is a new era, and I did not leave the old one and adapt in time. My fault. It's okay. It's new times.
The whole email he sent to everyone was a lot longer, but there's a specific point in this email that I'd like to point out. If you're curious about that and the entire history of Starbreeze recently, I'd highly suggest the article I've got linked in for reference down below. There's a lot of information which is interesting on there, not just about Bo Anderson, but also about the development hell, mistreatment of employees, and a lot more. But something in his email was rather odd. Bo said in his farewell email that he was fired, while in the statement from Starbreeze, the board claimed that he had stepped down. And there's a fairly simple reason for this. Firstly, it sounds better when you're filing for reconstruction, as you need to sound as understanding and sympathetic as possible, so if they stated we fired him because he spent our funds like a twat, they'd get rejected immediately. For anyone who doesn't know what this means, reconstruction applications are made when a company is financially in the red, aiming towards the direction of bankruptcy. A company can file for reconstruction. This allows the company to cut costs in various areas and attempt to make money back which they've lost. Now, I'm not really business savvy, I studied it for a year in 6th form, but I didn't really enjoy it all that much, so please take that with a pinch of salt, as I might have just completely fucked up the actual definition for what filing for bankruptcy implies. But I imagine from seeing they've requested an extension recently, I'm guessing things aren't going all that well, and this means if they don't cut costs in enough areas to keep the company afloat, then Starbreeze might be going bust and shut down. Not to say they're not trying though, as I said earlier, they recently sold the publishing rights of System Shock 3 back to the developers, and it sounds like Double Fine, the creators of Psychonauts 2, are prepared to do the same thing if Starbreeze fails to deliver. So if you add all that onto what Starbreeze have left to hold on to, then all they have is Payday 2, and since ending development and making all the DLCs into a bundle, it won't be enough to keep them financially stable until Payday 3 comes along. Although they did recently sign an agreement with Universal Games for the publishing of their Payday mobile game, so it might not all be hopeless. But even then, in my eyes, a mobile app won't do much to get them a lot of attention, so all that's left is Overkill's The Walking Dead. Now thankfully they were determined to fix this game in time for the console release, and even push back the release date to make sure it was ready. But then it all went wrong. On February 26th, in the middle of the night, news spread that Skybound had officially cancelled the game, taking it off Steam and stating that the console ports were never going to be released.
Today, Skybound Entertainment released the following statement. As of today, we have terminated our contract with Starbreeze Studios and will discontinue all efforts on Overkill's The Walking Dead. Our creators and their stories are the core of Skybound, and since 2014, we have worked hard to expand the world of The Walking Dead into an exceptional co-op action FPS. We did our best to work with Starbreeze and resolve many issues that we saw with the game. but ultimately, Overkills The Walking Dead did not meet our standards, nor is it the quality that we were promised. We are exceedingly sorry to our fans and share their disappointment in the game. We remain dedicated to providing our fans with the most premium quality content we can offer, and will continue to look for alternative video game options for the IP.
So that was it. Within 24 hours, the Steam store page for Overkills The Walking Dead was taken down, and no further updates will be pushed through from Starbreeze. It's a shame it went this way, but there's things about this statement that really rubbed me the wrong way. They mentioned in this statement that they worked hard with Starbreeze to resolve many issues that they saw with the game, and that it wasn't the quality they were promised. But does anyone here see a problem with this and how it contradicts itself? So within the 4 years of this game being developed, why did no one from Skybound bring up the engine being used wasn't even finished? Surely they must have a playable state to show Skybound, and if not, why did no one question this? Now I have a theory regarding this, and this theory tends to happen with a lot of games with a movie or TV license tie-in. Skybound had zero involvement with the development of this game, but to build up hype when trying to sell it to the Walking Dead fans, they lied stating they were heavily involved. If you think this idea came out of nowhere, I checked both live streams of Almir and Robert Kirkman in the same room, and I could not see at any point Kirkman talking about the development progress. At best he just repeats what Almir says a few minutes later. But still, their statements about cancelling the game still doesn't add up. It doesn't mention anywhere about the engine change, and I could never find anything about a statement from themselves when Starbreeze announced the change. From digging into the history of this game's development, I found very little, sadly. So at best, Skybound were only really involved with creating the story, or Starbreeze and Overkill filled in the rest. Or with how the overall plot for Overkills The Walking Dead felt, perhaps they weren't involved with that much either. Sadly, the issues surrounding Skybound don't actually end there, as there's hints that Skybound announced the cancellation publicly without actually warning anybody from Starbreeze or 505 Games first. And I actually have a bit of evidence to back this. Firstly, on February 20th, 505 Games announced on Twitter that while the console ports were delayed with no new release date, they were still convinced that these ports were going to happen, and funnily enough, they still believe this game is going to be postponed to this day rather than cancelled. But surely Starbreeze would have given them the heads up if they knew about this, right? Well, like I said, they didn't know either. Starbreeze currently have a schedule at the end of each month that they would release a new episode for Season 2 of The Walking Dead, and the announcement was made 2 days prior to Episode 4 being released. If you don't believe me, you can actually check this on Steam, as it clearly proves that Starbreeze were prepped to push this update out. 3 new achievements were already updated onto the Steam database, Elizabeth from Overkill had put out a Q&A on the Steam forums as they normally do before a dev stream before the patch goes live, and finally a member of Overkill spoke out on Steam about this, and this is what he had to say.
Yes, Starbreeze is currently trying to renegotiate with Skybound, so we can at least finish Season 2. It is extremely disappointing for us and caught us completely off guard. We have a lot of improvements that we're actively working on, including the patch that was meant to be released this week, 2 days after Skybound made their announcement. We will have to wait until the legal issues are resolved to know if we will be able to release that patch.
So that was it. Skybound were pulling the plug on this game. Starbreeze had no power to apply any further patches to the game, and the next day Starbreeze put out a public announcement where they basically repeat what that member of staff said. They're trying to attempt to renegotiate the contract with Skybound to try and finish off Season 2 for the players who purchased the Standard and Deluxe Edition, but the results so far are inconclusive, so we'll have to wait and see. I personally hope that Skybound agree to this, but it's only a matter of time until we find out. But until then, there's a sliver of hope on this game that it's not over just yet. And that's what some of us, including myself, are hanging on to. So who's to blame here? Well, I think it's safe to say that everyone is, with the least responsible being the development team. They were given an impossible task to make a game that was in development for 4 years within a year on an engine they weren't confident with, and then the most responsible people to blame would be both Starbreeze and Skybound. Starbreeze, or rather Starbreeze's management, and their late decisions started a one-way trip onto failure. With the game being delayed a few times already and having to have something out the door, they decided too late to switch the engine and didn't get the developers any more time, and wasted a ton of money on building hype with the character trailers. They blew the game's expectations out of the water, and the development team suffered for it. And then there's Skybound. They were the ones to make the choice, and a lot of the information here makes it sound like they had very little involvement with the game over the last few years. And I'm assuming after hearing all the bad press around the game and the stories about Starbreeze's poor management and lack of financial stability, Kirkman and the rest of the team decided to wipe their hands clean before any of the blood got stained on their hands. Now, I'd like to end this with a personal remark from me on how I felt about the game. I started with negative first impressions of Overkills The Walking Dead. There's definitely a lot wrong with this game, but I personally think deep down, there is a game here that is rather rather fun and replayable, and after roughly 160 hours of playing the game, I still stand by that statement. Overkill's The Walking Dead is a fun game, and I'm really pissed to see it be cancelled without them finishing the second season. I'm hoping Starbreeze find a way to fix this, or perhaps make their own zombie game without the restrictions of a license to follow, but to look at things more realistically, if things don't get better, Starbreeze days are numbered. Now obviously I'm in the vocal minority with all of this, as a lot of people are happy to see the gravestone of this game, and I'm sure you are too, but if there's one thing you get from this video, I hope it's this. When you write up your opinion on this game on the forums, reviews, or even this video, keep in mind one thing. While the development team are to blame for the poor product, it was Starbreeze and Skybound's lack of management that caused the shit to hit the fan.